Welcome to another show. This week, we will rank the top 10 Dracula movies from Christopher Lee.
Might interest you to know that Transylvania still exists, and I've been there. And the name of that nobleman, of course, immortalized in one book, known throughout the world now, was quite simply the word Dracula.
Thousands dying of the plague, and like the shadow of death itself, one figure scything its way through the terror and anguish. Count Dracula.
At number 10, the last and least of Lee's turns as the Count for Hammer Films. The Satanic Rites of Dracula doesn't look much like a Dracula movie or even a horror film. The bulk of it is a plotting effort to investigate cult activity by society notables. Lee and Cushing turning up as Dracula and Lorimer Van Helsing are so arbitrary that you could almost believe an error in the copy department shuffled a few pages of a vampire script into one for a cheap procedural. Satanic Rites does have an amusing moment where Lee affects, for the only time, the Bela Lugosi accent as a disguised Dracula. Christopher Lee later claimed that, for his death scene, he had to tear his way through actual hawthorn bushes, shedding real blood on the sharp thorns.
My revenge has spread over centuries and has just begun!
Count Dracula!
Welcome to my house.
Count Dracula.
I am Dracula.
Looking at number 9, among Lee's complaints with Hammer's Dracula films was how removed they were from Bram Stoker. He continuously pleaded with them to include material from the book. He was enticed with an offer to do just that in 1970 with Count Dracula, an independent Spanish production trumpeted as the most faithful adaptation of the novel. Here, Lee sheds all influence from Lugosi. His Dracula in this film looks just as Stoker described him, an old man clad all in black with a long white mustache. After the initial scenes in Dracula's castle, the script doesn't even try to follow the book. So much of it is dead air propped up by music stings, and Lee is wasted after his one good speech. Sir Christopher Lee, Count Dracula, and Herbert Lom, Dr. Van Helsing, never saw each other during filming. They shot all of their joint scenes separately. Director Jesus Franco claims that Klaus Kinski ate real flies as Renfield instead of fake ones. Christopher Lee rates his performance in the film as the best he has given as Dracula. Director Jesus Franco's first choice for the role of Dr. Abraham Van Helsing was Vincent Price. However, due to his exclusive contract with American International Pictures, Franco could not obtain Price, and his second choice, Dennis Price, was forced to withdraw because of illness. Franco got his third choice, Herbert Lom, for the role. This is one of 4 films released in 1970 in which Christopher Lee played Count Dracula. The others are One More Time, Taste the Blood of Dracula, and Scars of Dracula. This is the first major role for Soledad Miranda in a Franco film. She then died in a tragic automobile accident in Portugal that same year, just as her career was taking off. Christopher Lee stated in an interview that he felt that Herbert Lom and Klaus Kinski were miscast in their roles.
Master, take me with you, Master.
I have no further use for you.
The number 8 film on our list is Taste the Blood of Dracula. Hammer was aware of Lee's growing antipathy toward their Draculas well before Satanic Rites, and they tried several times to keep the series going without him. Taste the Blood of Dracula was meant to have Ralph Bates assume chief blood-sucking duties after his character, Lord Courtley, does as the title bids and returns from his own death as a vampire. Unfortunately, Hammer's American distributors wouldn't hear of a Dracula film without Lee's Dracula, so a deal and a hasty rewrite were in order. One of the few Hammer Dracula films that was R-rated, Taste the Blood of Dracula was able to push the envelope not only with its depiction of nudity and violence, but also with its dark themes. Coming in at number 7, In Search of Dracula, another non-Hammer production.
Yes, Virginia. There really was a Dracula.
In Search of Dracula is a documentary based on the non-fiction book of the same name. It's a crash course on vampiric folklore, Romanian culture, Orthodox religion, and the history of Vlad III Dracula, the Impaler, whom authors Radu Florescu and Raymond T. McNally attempted to tie to the literary Dracula more closely than Stoker did. It features Lee as the narrator, Dracula, and Vlad and reenactments of various legends concerning the sadistic prince. His appearances as the Count come from a combination of Hammer stock footage and original material that let him wear the long mustache again. In the end, he gets to have some fun with the Lost Curtain speech from the 1931 Dracula, which is a nice finishing touch. The number 6 film on our list is Dracula and Son. The French director Edouard Molinaro, noted for his comedies, decided to have fun with vampires and brought Lee in for Dracula and Son, his final turn as the Count. The multilingual lead provides his own dialogue as a more cultured, paternal, slightly foppish Dracula who ends up evicted from his castle with his meek son, Ferdinand. Separated in transit, Dracula ends up in London, where he makes it big as a horror movie star playing a vampire. Father and son reunite in Paris but end up at war when they fall in love with the same girl. It's a great premise for a parody, and Lee has the comic chops to pull it off. All the movie's big laughs come from Dracula's fussy displeasure with his son, the modern world, or general incompetence. Some gorgeous, blue-tinted Gothic set dressing provide visual interest. Unfortunately, neither element is enough in the picture. Too much of it is spent with Ferdinand in Paris, and he's boring without his father to bounce off.
Sweetie pie,
I'm asleep.
I don't feel like sleeping.
Well, I do. Stop it!
The abrupt ending leaves a lot to be desired. Still, there are flashes of fun and even brilliance here.
The cross! No!
The number 5 film on our list is Scars of Dracula, which was released on a double bill with The Horror of Frankenstein. That film functioned as both a remake and a parody of Hammer's The Curse of Frankenstein, and Scars was, at one point, imagined as a comparable fresh start that could be made without Lee. Yet the finished film opens with an obligatory resurrection of Dracula from the last film, and it's still Lee in the role. Due to a hold-up in production in the filming of Scream and Scream Again, Peter could spend a day filming a brief cameo as a milkmaid for the opening village and scene. At the beginning of the film, Dracula's resurrection is the same footage as Dracula's death from Taste the Blood of Dracula, but simply played in reverse. Jenny Hanley said she hated working with the big fake-looking puppet bat, and its 2 handlers were very distracting. They were a gay couple, one handling the head, the other dealing with the wings, and as they were wrangling the thing for the final attack on Hanley's character, they suddenly kissed, causing her to burst into fits of laughter.
I'm a bit of a giggler. The bat near the end coming in to grab the cross from around my neck obviously comes in, hits your chest and bounces off backwards. Now, that's amusing. I'm sorry, Christopher, that is funny. But Christopher actually takes it very seriously indeed and says, you know, you do realise this is a true person, Vlad the Impaler, and gave us all lectures and things. But you know, generally, we kept him off the set when giggles were apt to happen.
Who knows about vampires, for God's sake? My grandfather died fighting a vampire. The most terrible, the most dangerous vampire of all time.
Clocking in at number 4 is Dracula A.D. 1970. I'd say Hammer deserved points for originality, but they were chasing a trend set by Count Yorga, Vampire, when they pulled Dracula into modern-day London. Peter Cushing was along for the ride as Lawrence Van Helsing and his grandson Lorimer, both dedicated to wiping out vampires whether they menaced Victorian countrysides or groups of hippies. Those kids may spoil society dinners and waste their evenings boozing, but that hardly gives the Count the right to spoil their groove. Dracula A.D. 1972 has a notorious reputation among many Hammer fans as a shark jump. Lee never cared for it, but as Tim Burton once described the film, it was a mistake. But I enjoy mistakes sometimes. The incongruity of swingin' 70s London and Gothic horror is too silly not to enjoy. The plot, setting Dracula on a revenge quest against the Van Helsing family, is fairly solid. The film was inspired by the story of the Highgate Vampire, a media sensation in the early 1970s involving reports of supposed supernatural activity in Highgate Cemetery in London. In the film, Johnny Alucard and his friends arranged their ritual to coincide with the feast day of Belphegor. In Christian demonology, Belphegor is a demon who personifies sloth. Tim Burton has declared this as one of his favorite films. Looking at the number 3 film on our list, Horror of Dracula, Sir Christopher Lee complained about the contact lenses he had to wear for the shock scenes. Not only were they quite painful, but he couldn't see too far past the camera on the first take. Dracula only has 7.5 minutes of screen time. Lee tried to play the character of Dracula according to his theory of the loneliness of evil. He developed this theory he does not actually want to survive. He continues existing because he feels that he has no choice. Harper's Bizarre Litine meets the Wolf Man.
I didn't speak in it. I didn't say a word throughout the entire film. The answer is very simple. I read the script. And the lines were literally unsayable.
The number 2 film on our list is Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Lee took a long time to return to the Fangs after 1958, and it remains a question whether he refused to speak any dialogue for the sequel or whether writer Jimmy Sangster just didn't give him any. What Sangster did give Dracula, Prince of Darkness, were a few elements from the novel and used in the first film, a worthy successor to Van Helsing and Father Sandor, Andrew Keir, and a solid structure. Prince of Darkness was my first real encounter with Dracula as a kid, and Lee's mute but ferocious performance was enough that I had to shut the film off. Dracula's resurrection is the best scene in Hammer's series and still delivers chills. Add in a likable group of young leads, good pacing, and some first-rate art direction, and you have a sequel that arguably surpasses the original, even if Lee didn't like his dialogue. Sir Christopher Lee said he found the lines given to his character so awful that he chose to play it silently. According to screenwriter Jimmy Sangster, Lee misremembers this, as Sangster claims he wrote no dialogue for Dracula in the movie.
They were not Bram Stoker. This was a great fight I used to have over the years with Hammer. I kept on saying, why don't you use Stoker's words? Stoker's dialogue, if you like.
Sir Christopher Lee's stunt double, Eddie Powell, became trapped underwater during the drowning scene and nearly drowned. The character of Ludwig is obviously Hammer's version of Renfield from the original Bram Stoker novel, though it's largely undisclosed why the name of the character was changed. And the number 1 movie to feature Christopher Lee as Dracula is Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. I hope it doesn't encourage newcomers to say that Dracula Has Risen from the Grave works so well. Then, they had dinner afterward. Channel, ring the bell to stay informed, and check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise, also in the comments. Until next time, this is Axel and for Kevin, saying, live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.